All right, guys, so today we're doing something special. This is not the Next Door Entrepreneur podcast. It is even more fun than that because I get to be here with a good personal friend of mine, Mr. Sean Shecter. So Sean is the co-chair of White Collar Criminal Defense for Lewis Brisbois. Lewis Brisbois is a national law firm with offices in 55 states, and Sean gets to do a lot of cool stuff. But the bad part about being my friend is whenever I have legal questions, which are a lot, I call Sean and he has to answer them pro bono for me, which is probably really annoying to him, but that's what makes him such a good friend. So, with everything coming out about what is going on recently with Trump making a move to block institutional investors from potentially purchasing single-family residential homes, with everything going on with the move to push his representatives to purchase $200 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, and now just as recently as this weekend, because I'm recording this on a Monday, the DOJ issuing a grand jury subpoena to the Federal Reserve Chair with a potential criminal indictment being threatened. Sean gets to come here today and talk about all of these things. So here we are, Mr. Sean Shecter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. That's a tall list. I don't know where you want to start between indicting the Fed chair or banning large institutional investors. I don't know where you would want to start.
We could go back to when you were a federal prosecutor for the state of Florida, and we could talk about Operation Odessa, you putting the dude in jail who bought a submarine from the Russians to sneak drugs into Miami.
Yes, so that when I was a federal prosecutor, I did prosecute Yester Garrido on a marijuana conspiracy, but before Yester Garrido was convicted of a marijuana conspiracy, he did buy a Russian sub, and then with the conspiracy to import an actual ton
1 ton.
Probably more of cocaine. So yes, I was a part of that prosecution in the Middle District of Florida.
I love that. And meth, manufacturing, trafficking ring, biker gang in Daytona, you got those guys too?
Got those guys too, yes.
So
yes.
A good dude who puts bad guys behind bars, and now you're sitting behind a desk.
Now I'm sitting behind a desk and talking to you today
talking to me.
about large institutional investors buying houses.
Okay, so let's start there. Because that was originally why we said we were going to have this conversation today. It's about the Trump making the announcement that he's going to block large institutional investment firms from purchasing single-family residential homes, or in other words, the houses that we think Americans should be living in here today. Right? I know the data. I think you know the data too. What does that actually represent in terms of the total market of how many homes out there are truly owned by institutional investors that potentially could be owned by your average American home?
It depends who you ask. And before we get into that data, we got to take a step back and say, what is the problem, right? Why is Trump and both the Republicans and the Democrats talking about this issue? Right? Why are we talking about this issue? Since 2019, single-family homes, the price of a single-family home, you know this, has increased over almost 50%.
Correct.
And so there's also a housing shortage. And there is, both parties are cognizant of that young individuals in their 30s and 40s are unable to buy a home.
First-time home buyers, your initial move-up buyer. Yeah, that's right. It's difficult. Affordability is a thing.
So there's two ways to look at this data. Large institutional investors, by some data metrics, if you're looking at the cons of doing this, you'll say, look, nationwide, they own between 1% to 3% of single-family homes. Blackstone, who was impacted by this, says they own 0.05% of single-family homes. There's a flip side of that. The pro to this is, well, in certain hot markets, let's call it Atlanta or Dallas or other areas, these large institutional investors. Now, and that's a bit of a term that is, what does that mean? Large institutional investors, 100 or 1,000? So data is a bit all over the place. But the data says that in some markets, they own between 20 to 30% of the homes for rent in those markets, single-family homes.
And now that's a big number. That's a number that impacts all the metrics in a market, certainly.
But what I think you got to take a step back to this, and what not a lot of people are talking about is, he made an announcement on Truth Social saying that he may do an executive action, and we can talk about what that executive action is.
That's why you're here. I got to figure out how this works, if it can work.
Or he asked Congress to pass a law, right?
Okay.
But in the immediate aftermath of that announcement, what happened to the stocks in those companies? What happened to their market share?
Yeah.
They were down sometimes between 6 to 8%.
I love it. Even the poor guys at BlackRock got smacked because everyone thinks they're Blackstone.
Right.
Poor guys. Yeah.
And so what it's also doing is that announcement may be setting the stage to say, you may not want to invest in these large institutional investors, even if I don't end up doing executive order, even if Congress doesn't pass some law.
Yeah.
The word out is on the street that maybe that's not a safe bet.
Okay. All right. So let's walk through the legality of it. And before we get there, can you walk me through, just tell me how much power does an executive action carry? Like what truly is, what is that?
So the executive order is exactly
Executive order, thank you.
What it means is, and so the executive and
Yeah.
all the agencies that work for the president, they're under the president. We think of U.S. Treasury, we think of the DOJ, Agriculture, Interior. The president can issue executive orders directing those agencies to carry out certain tasks that the president deems are in his or the nation's best interest.
Yeah.
They're not law. They are not codified. And so one of the things that we always see is that the pendulum can swing back. You have an executive order today under a Republican, it can be scrapped by a Democrat and vice versa. So it only applies.
So it's a directive.
It is a directive.
Okay.
And it only applies to the executive agencies. Now, what that means also is that it is subject to lawsuits in court saying that banning large institutional investors, that executive order could impact free speech, the right to invest. It could impact their business needs. And so passing executive orders implicates many potential legal suits because it's not an act passed by Congress. And so let's just take for this example, banning large institutional investors, an executive order.
Yeah.
He could direct certain government agencies to say, we are no longer purchasing or securitizing large institutional investors' investments in single-family homes. He could also direct the U.S. Treasury to look at the tax implications of large institutional investors investing in single-family homes. Think about it, the red tape.
Yeah.
The red tape that these large institutional investors go through to obtain a mortgage, to obtain funding, all the government agencies, the alphabet soup of government agencies, he could put in place certain roadblocks so that the process is not as easy for them. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Now, again, that makes it very susceptible to lawsuits.
Well, my head immediately goes to, capital, of course, as the mortgage guy in the room who talks about the way this whole thing keeps on spinning, right? The way these large institutional groups acquire most of these homes is via debt, right? They leverage up. That's how they get ultimately their return on equity, their return to their investors. So you're telling me that through this executive order, one of the potential ways that he could slow this down is by putting in place directives to an executive agency that make it harder on Wall Street, other capital allocators to make the resources available to these institutional investors to go out and make these acquisitions.
Correct.
So in other words, impact their bottom line,
Correct.
right? He's telling them, restricting them, saying you can't do business in these places.
Correct. And so again, what that means is then though, they could go into court and sue and say this is unconstitutional, this violates our rights, this violates, our business, and they can seek an injunction from a federal judge. And we've seen this story before. We've seen this story under the Biden administration with student loan debt forgiveness. Immediately got enjoined by a federal district judge, and we see this with the Trump administration with their executive orders on certain other things. The strongest way, the most enduring way to do this is to have Congress pass a law. Now, we do know that there are laws in Congress. The Senate just passed a bill that looked to help the housing supply.
Yeah.
But that didn't pass the House. And so the real long-term effects of this is you really need Congress to pass something.
Yeah.
But, right now, the impact is huge. Again, we're going back to that statement. That announcement was made. Their shares are down.
Move markets immediately.
Move markets immediately.
Yeah.
And so if you move markets immediately, maybe Congress then follows. Maybe agencies follow. But it's not going to be enduring. A real enduring lasting impact Congress will need to pass these laws.
Okay. All right. So when you talk about, moving markets, last week there was the announcement of him, and I'm going to get this right because I read this over, directing his representatives to purchase $200 billion worth of mortgage-backed bonds, right?
Correct.
So we're talking about government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, right? We're talking about all of the various agencies that he either has not control over, right? But they're executive agencies, government-sponsored entities, things like that. Can he do that? Can he? Because last time when we saw this before, when we saw quantitative easing during the pandemic, that was a decision made by the Federal Reserve, right? So that wasn't the executive branch. So can he do this? Because boy, that moved markets.
Yeah, he can do it for his federal agencies.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, what is the impact of that, right? You just mentioned the Federal Reserve. He can't order the Federal Reserve to do that. And they would have the largest impact, right? But again, it's trying to send a signal to the market that this is what he's doing. So yes, he could order his agencies to do that. When he says representatives, it is still a bit curious who he means by that.
Yeah.
What
Very
that
ambiguous term.
Very ambiguous. And again, it could be, it would have to be an executive agency, not an independent agency such as the Fed.
Okay. Do you follow Truth Social? Do you have a Truth Social account?
I do not have a Truth Social account. No.
I feel like you should, just to catch
know,
this stuff
know.
first before anyone else.
I know.
Then again, it gets disseminated out to the various media platforms so fast. It's
Yes.
almost like, what's the point? I'll just keep
Exactly.
an eye on X and I'll see it soon enough.
Exactly.
You might have like a 10-second delay over seeing it posted there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Very cool. So we weren't even planning on this.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But then Friday, right? Let me get this straight and help clarify me. So the DOJ serves a subpoena, right? Are they serving it to Jerome Powell? Are they serving it to the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board? Are they serving it to the body, the entity that is the federal? Walk me through that real quick.
So what happens is for the DOJ to issue a subpoena, there has to be a grand jury investigation, right? Their grand jury meets in secret, and they issue subpoenas through related to a grand jury subpoena.
Okay.
That subpoena is given. I haven't seen the subpoena, but usually what happens is now a subpoena can be issued to an individual or an entity.
Yeah.
My understanding is it was issued to an entity, the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve Board, and they indicated that there is an investigation, a criminal investigation going on related to the renovations at the Federal Reserve Board's headquarters in D.C. and concerning statements concerning those renovations that the Fed chairman made previously to Congress and others.
Yeah, that classic little clip that we saw of them standing there next to each other with their hard hats on, reading through the budget. Yeah. And then, of course, his testimony. That's interesting. So how does this shake out?
I mean, I hate to use these words, unprecedented ones. I hate to use those words because I feel like everyone uses those words, but it really is unprecedented. And I think problematic. I think if you take a step back, other other central bank leaders, I can't think of a time in history where they've been issued a criminal subpoena. I'm talking in Europe or throughout the country.
It's dicey, right? Because you want those individuals to truly be independent of political pressure, right? You want them to be making data-driven economic decisions. You don't want them to be concerned about any other branch of government exerting political pressure on them. Although, selfishly, I want to see rates lower. Duh.
Right.
I want this, but you also want a government that functions in the way it should function.
Right, and so let me take the Trump perspective from this point of view. Trump says Trump perspective is that he doesn't need to lower interest rates this way, this is not a political vendetta, that there is an investigation, there's information. Playing devil's advocate, there could be information out there that they're in receipt of that causes them some pause and calls into question whether information provided to Congress about the renovations or statements made about the renovations were true or accurate. Then there's the flip side of this, and I think you're seeing this across the political spectrum, which is exactly what you say. Even Republican senators are saying this. the Federal Reserve, and the market's speaking about this as well. The market doesn't like this as well. The market wants the Federal Reserve to be independent, making data-driven decisions. And the importance of that is, and I think what scares some Republicans is, right now you have a Republican in the White House. Yeah. What happens in a couple of years when you get a Democrat? Does the Democrat then do the same thing when
they're not exert political pressures to take it the other direction?
On Trump's appointee. Yes. They don't want Trump's appointee. He will appoint in the coming months, and they say, oh, well, we want to know everything you did that was potentially illegal with interest rate cuts. Were you making false statements? And it creates this race to the bottom. And I think both the markets and a lot of people in Washington are nervous about this because it's not a good precedent. Unless there is quite literally information that they have that somebody did some wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And so, look, there's a whole lot of issues about whether they will respond, how they will respond, what documents that they can provide, whether there's any laws being violated. But I will say this, that proving false statements as a criminal act is incredibly hard to do. And we've seen this with some of these other, we've seen this throughout history, that juries don't necessarily like those charges because you have to prove that it was a materially false statement made with the intention of being false.
Yeah.
And if you have a statement to Congress, there's a lot of wiggle room that you can have. You can say what you may believe is maybe false. The defense can say, well, that wasn't materially false, and there's no intent behind that. Those are very hard cases to prove.
Yeah.
And the DOJ has not had a lot of success with those cases throughout history. And so I don't think that people should look at this and say, oh, that's going to be the easy case for the DOJ to bring. It won't be. And so I think that's another reason giving people pause, because they're saying, that's what you're investigating?
Yeah. Does this stop, delay, slow down the appointment of a new Fed chair?
Well, there's a Republican senators today who are saying yes. They're saying we're not going to appoint a new Fed chair until we understand what is going on with this investigation. And I think this is where this is backfiring on them. If the goal was to get Powell out, if the goal was to put in somebody else, I think you're seeing across the political spectrum, both Republicans and Democrats say, well, we're not going to do anything until we figure out what is going on here. And I think that is a potential, again, put us in uncharted waters. Can you replace a Fed chair who's under investigation? And not to mention, he still can be on the Federal Reserve even after he steps down from Fed chair. Does he need to step down? These are issues that are going to, in the coming days, we're going to see much more of. And I think this goes back to our first point, where we were talking about, right now, housing is in a major issue in this country, the affordability of housing. And Trump has attacked that he hasn't lowered those interest rates. Lower interest rates allows more people to buy houses.
Yeah, it's funny, literally, not to finish your thought, but as I was literally about to come down and sit down for this interview, Bloomberg, the headline was Bill Pulte was the lead instigator behind the DOJ subpoena. So anyways, go on, right? We're in a housing problem at the moment.
You're in a housing problem.
Affordability problem.
Affordability problem. And again, both Democrats and Republicans, this is one thing they can agree on.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one thing where there's actual agreement. The guy who ran for mayor in New York said the rent's too damn high.
Yeah.
Like, the prices of houses are too damn high, and they want to lower it. But how do we go about doing that? We know it's a supply issue. We know there's issues with people being able to afford mortgages. This is clouding all these issues.
Yep.
And I think there truly is a thread line between statements by Trump to ban large institutional investors, to saying that his representatives will buy back $200 billion in bonds, to what we're seeing now with the Federal Reserve. I think it's that through line dealing with affordability of housing.
Okay. All right. No, I agree with you 100%.
Of course you do. You should.
And it's not just because you're a great guy and my friend who answers my phone calls with legal questions all the time.
Exactly.
Perfect. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for other people to bother you with legal questions?
The best way is to look me up online, Sean Shecter with Lewis Brisbois.
Okay.
My email and phone information is there.
Okay.
And they can reach out.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate you coming out.
Or you can just,
or they can reach out to me.
Or can they reach out to you? Why don't we reverse? Why don't we reverse the
yeah. They can reach out to me. I can do an introduction.
Yes.
It works perfectly.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss as it pertains to anything on the legal front, housing front, with what's going on?
Well, I think it's one more thing. This is a continuing conversation.
Yeah.
So we know he's going to Davos at the end of Switzerland. He said that he's going to be detailing more details about this.
Detailing more details.
Detailing more details. And so I think for your listeners and people who watch, this is an ongoing story that doesn't end today. Mm-hmm. And, happy to come back at the end of January and February as we get through when we have more information what this administration is doing.
That would be wonderful. And we will do that. And we'll figure out a way to get them up fast so we can do quick updates. Hear that, Gio? We're going to get them up fast. All right. Cool. Thank you, Sean.
Yep.